All right, let's do it. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the writing panel. My name is Justin Robert Young. I'll be your moderator. Joining me are two of my favorite authors. First, his new book is Pilot X. His name is Tom Merritt.
Why, thank you.
And joining him, his new tome is A God in the Shed. It is J-F.Dubeau.
When you said favorite authors, I half expected you to introduce me as Andrew Main.
Yeah, I was waiting for John Scalzi to show up.
No. I dislike him. Not Scalzi, Maine. All right, so this is going to be a conversation about not only writing, but also being a writer and getting your stuff published and out there in the world. So let me ask you guys a very simple question. What is the biggest thing that helps you go from an idea in your mind to the act of writing? Because I think that's always the biggest challenge, is building the good habits to sit down and actually do the hard work in writing. So we'll start with Tom.
Yeah, so the process that got Pilot X and Citadel 32 and La Beta done has changed for me, and I'll tell you why at the end. But those books, I got in a pattern because I was doing National Novel Writing Month, which I failed at for years. And then the first time I succeeded was United Moon Colonies. I failed for a couple more years. And then I think Citadel 32 was the next one that actually got me going. And then I've done one every year except for this year. And the way those worked was, as I was trying to fall asleep at night, I would think of stories. And I've done that almost my entire life, just to get myself to fall asleep. And so I would start writing them down on a blog that I never talk about, that no one knows is there, and just try out little pieces of the story. And when National Novel Writing Month would come along, I'd take all those pieces, I'd put them down, and I'd say, okay, I'm going to get to 50,000 words with this.
What would they be, of one narrative or
Yeah.
just a bunch of different?
Yeah,
All right,
they would
so
be in a
you
world.
you would be writing piecemeal.
Yeah. And so they'd be pieces of a world and a story, and then National Novel Writing Month is where I would turn them into a narrative.
Gotcha.
I'd assemble them. And then over the next year, I have a task every day to either write or edit something. So every day I would work a little bit, even if it's just a sentence. I would work on editing those and polishing them up. That fell apart this year because I fall asleep a lot faster. And I've had a harder time with the story I'm working on now because of that. Plus, I failed at NaNoWriMo again this year for various reasons.
Have you considered speed?
A return to speed? Or?
Watching the Keanu Reeves, Sandra
Yeah.
Bullock movie?
No, I was
Yeah.
thinking, meth.
Methamphetamine, sure, yeah.
Sure, no, yes, I've considered it.
Okay.
I feel like it's a bad idea.
You're probably right.
So now I'm actually trying to, now instead of polishing and editing stuff, because I got ahead, I've got 2 in the can, I'm actually writing the story that I would have written during NaNoWriMo. But the short answer to your question would be that daily task where,
There's something to do every single day.
And I tell myself, even if you only have time to write one line or look at one line, because I make myself do that and I take the pressure off, I generally do more than that.
Yeah. JF?
Very kind of similar in some certain themes and results, but from a different angle. I got into writing very much the same way as you did, through NaNoWriMo, through National Novel Writing Month. But instead of having come to it because I was already writing things, I had explored just about every other type of storytelling medium, from maybe short stories, some role-playing games, comic books, anything I could try that wasn't this terrifying monolithic idea of writing a huge novel. The idea of 30 to 50,000 to 100,000 words was just this horrifying sort of a benchmark to go over that seemed impossible. And NaNoWriMo, which clearly, obviously, we're suggesting you guys do that if you want to get into writing, because that helped us. I don't know if you second that.
Yeah, totally.
I'll
third it.
Yeah, well, that's odd that you can do that on your
No,
own.
it's breaking the rules. So I don't care.
He's got a super majority.
Wow. The U.S. electoral thing.
Yeah.
It's way more
We do
complicated
things
than what
different
we
down here,
clearly.
Joe.
It's an electoral college thing, I'll assume. But that's the thing. NaNoWriMo gave me this challenge, and that's a lot of how they used to advertise it. I think they still advertise it that way, and having it be a challenge kind of gamified it for me and said, I need to do this. And halfway through, I realized that the process of writing a book wasn't a monolithic thing. It wasn't this scary mountain to climb because I don't have to do it in one shot. It's something that for NaNoWriMo, you spread it over a month. It's still kind of a marathon because the average is about 1,600 words a day. But once you get into habit, and once you've done 2 weeks of it, I realized at least that this was my meth, this was my addiction, and I wouldn't be able to stop doing that. So from that point on, it became a question of discipline, very much like Tom was describing, where it's not necessarily forcing myself because I always enjoy sitting down and writing. It's actually created a problem where I don't consume as much media as I should, because I try to create media instead. And it feels like, oh yeah, no, I'm more of a creator now. No, you need a balance of both, otherwise you stagnate. Something I'm discovering right now. But it's the same thing. You get into this pattern, whether because you love it or because you have the motivation or you have the self-discipline to at least do a little piece a day. And much like Tom says, once you're sitting down to actually write, okay, I'm gonna write my one sentence, that's all I feel I have in me right now. Once you've sat down, you've got your laptop, you've got your thing going on, and you've written that one sentence, what's another sentence? And another, and then your wife is screaming at you to go to bed or whatever.
And then your character starts screaming at other characters.
Yeah, and then,
Yeah.
and then the line between life and fiction kind of blurs, and your world becomes, then you're on meth.
So,
That's the point of this entire.
Yeah.
it's probably, we are now dealing meth.
Yeah, once I'm done with this, see me outside.
Yeah. So something that I think kind of struck me as the difference between your guys' process is, Tom, you described writing these kind of pieces in space and then figuring out the best way to assemble them. J.F., you didn't explicitly talk about doing like outlines, but that is something that I know that is really important to a lot of writers' process, is the strong roadmap that then you fill in. And Tom, it seems like you're kind of almost going the opposite way.
Yeah, well, I'll take those pieces. For instance, the story I'm working on right now is about a secret world, or a secret land that has controlled the world's governments for centuries. And what I started...
Jesus, Alex Jones.
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, are we talking about Montauk Project?
Well,
Yeah.
and I started with the idea of like, oh, how would that get started? And so I set it like super ancient times, and I wrote out these little kind of histories. And then I was like, well, what kind of language would they speak? And so I came up with a glossary. And then I wrote a couple of modern times, like, okay, well, now that they're in the modern times, how do they act? How do they influence things? And so when I sat down to the story, I'm like, well, okay, some of this is just reference material for me to refer
Yeah.
to. Some of it are blocks that will appear in the story. And I just start writing, and usually what happens in NaNoWriMo is, as I'm writing, I know the blocks that I need to get to, and I'll start to come up with a roadmap in my head. And it's not so much an outline, but I'll start to realize, like, oh, the story's gonna go here, here, and here. I'll just put that at the bottom of my Word doc.
Yeah.
And kind of aim towards them.
And so work to get to these pieces, as opposed to saying, all right, here are my 20 moments I need in the story.
Yeah.
These will basically be my chapters, and I need to get blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, and sometimes I'll even ignore them. Like,
Yeah.
with the current one, at one point, two characters were supposed to get a secret message but not know who it was, and then hijack a plane.
Yeah.
And I decided that I didn't want to hijack the plane, not for any reason. I was like, oh, no, I think it'll be more interesting for them to meet a secret person that convinces them, stuff like that.
And my one question for you is, where do the Zionist financial cabals fit into all of this?
Do what?
Yeah, I'm going back to this conspiracy thing.
Designist?
CC Justin gets it.
Yeah. Oh, no, totally.
Designist, though. What's designist?
Zionist.
Oh,
The
Zionist.
Zionist, the Zionist
It's my
cabal.
Hearing's
thick,
going.
No, it's my thick French accent.
Exactly, you know.
Oh,
Yeah, no, that was just a front group for this group.
God.
Oh, yeah.
That they use a lot of that kind of thing to deflect.
Well,
people
look
from discovery.
for Protocols on the Elders of Merritt coming out this fall. JF, outlines. Are you more of a strict outline person?
My process is akin to a kid with a lot of sugar and then playing with Legos, in the sense that I do some outlining. Like, I have an idea of what I want to build with those Legos. If I want to build a spaceship, I know it's a spaceship, but I won't necessarily have instructions on how to put all the pieces together. But I'll sit down and not, as an analogy, if you will, I'll build certain pieces. Like, I want my engines to look this way, so I'll pick the pieces I like and put them together to create set pieces. I want this character and I want this through line.
Yeah.
There's this scene I think is going to be really cool. And I try to sort of prearrange these pieces so that they're already existing. So I know who my characters are. I know what these set pieces are. I know what my ending is going to be. And then once all that's done, if you want to call that plotting, I guess it is, but it's not super strict and structured. Then I sort of put on the spine of a timeline for the story, and then I'll sit down and I'll write a book. But from that point on, it becomes it's a bit like coding in a dumb way, and probably not. I don't know coding enough for this knowledge, but I'll try to make it work. It's a bit like coding in the sense that I've got all my lines of codes, all my functions, and all my objects, everything. I'm using a lot of jargon I don't even understand, but I've got everything ready, and then I hit compile as I'm writing, and the writing portion is the compilation, and sometimes I'll end up with scenarios much like Tom described, where I have these two characters, they're supposed to meet, and they're supposed to get really well along and become a team, and that's going to go further, but I've created the character to have this personality, and this other character has this other personality, which is supposed to work well, but as they're going through the story, as the program is compiling, they change, and eventually when they do meet, when these two pieces of programming, of code are supposed to interact, instead of doing what I had in mind to do, there's a bug in the code, and it doesn't work as I had predicted. Now, this sounds like a bad thing, but as a writer, it is actually the best thing ever for me, because it's this unpredictable thing, this problem I need to solve, and that's when the story kind of surprises me. And that's when I need to fix it and change things, much like I'll remove a scene, or I'll add a scene, or just add a character. Sometimes a character is more interesting than you thought it would be, and you try to bring it to the forefront, make it more of a primary character. So I would say the best thing about a plan is how it's going to fail in interesting ways for me.
Yeah.
And I try to allow it to do that and not be overly structured.
Yeah, Tommy, you just brought something up. What's this?
This is actually the outline. This is all I have. Not outline, but this is like the end of the current book that I'm working on. It's just like 4 or 5 lines of like, Barnatuk wants to keep Rob for life. Vera and Matar make a stand. Then Vera develops a new plan. Novel finishes with, I won't say, in case you ever want to read it. And then cut to last passage of the backstory, like the ancient story. That's
Nice.
That's
That'll be
fun,
good
yeah.
for the movie. They love doing that.
yeah.
Yeah, you need to make a beat sheet.
I need to make it cheaper to shoot. Apparently, that was the problem with Pilot X.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow, that's the problem I had with Life Engineer.
Oh, what it's almost like Adam says that to everybody.
It's almost as goddamn spaceships. Like, nah, spaceships. No one likes that.
Yeah.
Expense.
What is a moment in your writing where, like JF said, you surprised yourself, or your story kind of surprised you? Can you think of one example where it was like you were either delighted or annoyed with yourself or your story, that like, this is what the right way to do, and now I have to change it or alter it, or be like, oh wow, I stumbled onto this pile of gold. Look at that.
Who do you want to start?
Tom.
Okay, so in Pilot X, I've had a couple people mention that they really like the character who is trying to bring an invitation to the main character, and what happens? Spoiler alert. Minor plot point is this guy keeps trying to give this invitation to Pilot X at the wrong point in the timeline. So the conceit in the book is that depending on your job, you have a different name. It's Pilot X or Ambassador X, and he keeps it coming up and saying Instructor X, and he's like, no, I'm Pilot X. He's like, oh, sorry, wrong part of the timeline. He keeps coming back. That started because during NaNoWriMo, I got to a point where I was just like, I don't know what to do. I'm bored. I don't want to write. And I've learned that when I'm bored, that means the reader's going to be bored. So I'm like, I'll just have a guy show up and do, invite him to something. I didn't even know what it was going to be, why I was doing it. I just threw it in there, and I was like, I can always pull it out if it doesn't make sense. And then later on, I was like, hey, I'm going to have that guy show up again. And then it turned into this little side.
This
plot.
recurring
Yeah.
gag, yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome. JF?
This is one of those characters I was reading. It's like, how does this guy keep his job? He's always at the wrong place at the wrong time. And it seems his only job is being at the right time at the right place.
But keep in mind, for him, it was like 15 minutes of time. So they never knew how many, he just didn't tell them.
So he got fired later.
Yeah, when they did an audit.
Yeah. Well, he never got to it because of the universe. Spoilers. Well, actually, that's in the first freaking chapter.
Yeah, it is.
This is IJAG. This is my outline, so it's a bit different from what Tom does.
Yeah.
Because it involves a lot of very colorful index cards.
And what program is that?
This is Storius. It's very similar to Scrivener.
Okay.
Gotcha.
In a sense, but it's cheaper, and I'm poor, so there you go.
Yeah.
But no, they're essentially the same program, so that works. Things that surprised me.
Yeah, a moment where you were either frustrated or delighted with your story.
I'm lucky for now that I've never really been frustrated with any of this process. From talking to other authors, not a typical experience. Something that did surprise me is when I finished writing Life Engineered, and I was getting it ready for and Life Engineered is a book that I wrote very much. I wanted to write something cool with robots, and I did that, and I had a couple of ideas for how technology would evolve for that. So I wrote it in a way that was much more similar to how Tom described his plotting to be. But when I reread it the first time, I noticed that my entire book about dumb robots in the future flying around the galaxy was actually this very elaborate, multi-layered analogy about motherhood, which I had not planned in any way. And it also explained why, like, the demographic they would hit. But in my mind, I accidentally wrote something that had a much deeper meaning than I wanted it to, but it's still about a silly book about robots. So that was a delightful surprise because it also encouraged me to maybe push further when I'm plotting and preparing a book to have something that has more meaning. And that's how I got to God in the Shed. That's intentionally the same way, if you will.
And the other part of that, for those of you who want to write, that day where you feel like, I got nothing, everything I'm going to be writing is stupid, is the day you should just push yourself to just put anything. Don't care. You can think this is the dumbest thing, I'm going to rip it out later, because most of the time, and I think you've had this experience too, when you go back and read that, you find out it's not nearly as bad as you thought, and that you did stuff because you didn't care and thought it was stupid and you're going to rip it out, that you wouldn't have done, that ends up being pretty cool.
Yeah, and just to add to that, sometimes you'll write something, you'll know it's a bad paragraph, or it's a bad sentence, or it's a bad piece of dialogue, and when you go back to it, you'll notice the value of it, and you realize that it's a word from being okay. Like, this sentence sounds stupid coming from this character, but it is literally just 2 words from sounding cool and being a good piece of dialogue. And obviously, as you're writing it, you're always thinking like a couple of ideas ahead. So you're not necessarily in the mindset to do, like, there's 2 different mindsets between editing and writing. And as you're going along, like, you just want your story to move, you want your characters to do their thing. So you're not necessarily always correcting, and you probably shouldn't, because you want to keep that flow and pacing going. And you want it to be fun, because what Tom said earlier about if writing for you is a chore that's boring and terrible and you hate it, chances are readers are going to think that reading your book is a chore that's terrible and boring and not worth it. So as long as you're having fun, just keep at it. And when you go back and you reread it, you'll see the value. You'll be able to course correct. You'll be able to make things that sound a bit clunky sound a lot smoother and cooler and fun.
Yeah. Kill somebody, jump off a cliff. I mean, not literally, like in your book.
Yeah.
Oh, no, come on, don't judge.
Yeah.
I'm not going to tell you.
I'm gonna judge.
Run the mountains.
I think a part of the reason why we have so many people here right now is the fact that you guys are not that far away from just being guys who want to write and now have stuff that is on bookshelves thanks to Inkshares. When did you guys consider yourselves not guys who like to write, but writers, if you do?
I kind of waffle back and forth, to be honest.
Yeah.
I have a lot of friends that will get very pissed at me when I say, oh, I wish I would get to the point where I'm a writer, and then I get reminded, like, well, you have 2 published books. Maybe you should shut up about not being a writer and accept that you are one. And from an objective point of view, I completely get it, but it seems like the benchmark of where I want to call myself a writer keeps moving every time I achieve something.
Yeah.
And it's the wrong way to look at it. Like, it seems petty, but the whole idea of, oh, if you write, you're a writer, should be kind of enough. But at the same time, it's like, yeah, but maybe,
Well, there is a vocational element to it,
exactly.
right? Like, and if you make any kind of money, it is different than if you are just writing books and publishing them for free as ebooks, right? Which is, there's no shame in that. There's certainly a great exposure that you can have in doing that. But And even then, if you were doing, I would say if you're publishing a free ebook for exposure to get another thing, then you are indeed a writer yourself. So,
Who does that?
yeah, what are you, where do you draw that line, Tom?
So for other people, like
Yeah.
when I'm talking to JF, I'm one of the guys like, shut up, you're a writer. You know?
Yeah.
In fact, you're not just a writer, you're an author. You're a published
Author.
right? And then when
Ooh,
I talk
the
to myself,
A word.
I say, well, Tom, but,
Yeah.
you know, in your own head, you start giving buts. But the first,
Not yes and, it's but no.
yeah, but yeah. The first time I saw Pilot X on a shelf at a Barnes & Noble, I was like, huh, all right, so this is legit. So, you know, I still am like, well, I'm not John Scalzi, you know, I'm not Patrick Rothfuss, you know, but
Beard is
like
not
you
nowhere
say,
near Rothfuss level.
no kidding. But so you keep in your own mind setting that level. That in some ways I think that's healthy. Of like, yeah, but I'd like to be. You
Yeah.
know, that's my aim. I want to get up there. So it's being honest about like, all right, I'm not just playing around anymore. Like I've written something that people seem to like, and
Yeah.
I want to keep doing it.
I think I've settled into accepting that being a writer is more about going to be the journey. It's kind of, I think it sounds stupid. It's kind of like a cat is perfectly content, almost catching a mouse. Not necessarily, it's not about catching and having it. It's not about being a writer. It's not about getting to that point where, hey, I'm a writer, done. It's about always trying to get that red dot, always, it's about the chase.
Yeah.
And as long as you keep having, like setting yourself some benchmarks, it motivates you to just push further. Say, well, okay, last time I published a book and it was on bookshelves and I was a writer in that moment when I noticed that. And then you pull back a bit, yeah, but I could be a writer that has my book internationally published. So let's do another book and see if we can push that one further. And and then that works out. I'm a writer in that moment. Then you pull back a bit and you look for another benchmark to pass. So it's, at least to me, like I'm not advocating this. It's probably not healthy, but just to me, it's a way of keeping myself motivated in accepting I'm a writer in certain instances, and then when I need to sort of push myself, sort of just pull back. Like I'm a writer, but I'm not the writer I want to be yet.
All
That's a good way
right,
to
so
put
now
it,
that
yeah.
you guys have both fallen into my rhetorical trap. Because how many people in here right now are writers and would like to continue to further that? We've got a smattering here.
If you write things, admit you're a writer for the
Okay.
purposes of this exercise.
Well, I want this, because you guys both admitted that you have now moved beyond a certain level, and you now think of yourselves in a different way than you did
bastard.
before.
And now he's gonna go, who do
So
you
now,
think you are?
so now,
Just gonna
to
put down
these
the
people
story.
right now that raise their hands, like not general advice, speak to them like you could speak to yourselves. You
Get
know,
out now.
in that moment.
It's not.
What advice? If you could distill it down
Yeah,
to like
yeah.
one essential truth that you now know when you are beyond whatever that threshold is.
Well, I take what R.A. Salvatore said to us on an episode of Sword and Laser once, to someone who was asking, how do I become a writer?
Yeah.
Who's like, don't. If you can stop writing, stop right now. If you can't, if you hear my advice and you're like, nope, I'm going to keep writing, then just keep doing it. Do it every day. Just keep writing, keep practicing, keep editing. Don't edit yourself, like JF said, while you're writing, edit yourself later. It's two different mindsets. But if you can stop, stop. And if you can't, then you're on the path to being someone who is an author.
And take solace in the work.
Yeah.
Like that
Well-
every day I gotta write, I gotta do this.
And for me, the ideal, this is getting beyond, this is like total meta, but the ideal for me is for the job that pays my bills to be things I would want to do anyway. Like that's my entire plan.
Yeah.
That is my only goal, is like, I don't want to have to deal with stuff I don't like. I just want to do stuff I like. And one of the things I like is creating stories. One of the things I like is doing podcasts. So I'm like, you know what? I can't not do stories. I really enjoy do stories. I'm going to keep doing them. And I started with a very low bar for myself of like, hey, I can self-publish. I'll just put it out there and give it to some people and see what they think and get some feedback, because getting other people to read your stuff is essential as well to improving.
JF?
In the same line of thought, I mean, I don't want to hang with R.A. Salvatore, but
Well, I don't hang with
Wow.
Talk to him once.
Wow.
Jeez,
High-roaded.
bus tire tracks all over.
I
the
know,
place.
jeez. Hollywood Tom over here, rubbing elbows with the literary stars.
You've been on Sword and Laser too, man.
I'm trying to get on again. It's not working.
I know. We need to beat Veronica up about that.
No, it's fine. It's fine. I could drop names.
No,
if you like.
talk shit about her. It's fine.
No, I already think she doesn't like me, so I'm trying to
like
try
anybody.
to-
Yeah, don't worry.
So, in the same line of thought, I love Ari Salvatore's advice. I've read it somewhere. Actually, I probably heard it on Sword and Laser. But in the same line of thought, but maybe with a bit more flexibility in the sense, if you really, really want to be a writer, but you find that you're not liking what you're writing, there's two things that you can do. Eventually, you'll want to quit if it's not working out. But two things you can do. Find what you can write that you like writing. Because Tom and I write science fiction. I also write horror. You write a lot more political science fiction than I do. I write robot stuff. But there's nonfiction. There's people in the audience here that I know have stories that would make great nonfiction books. There's literary fiction, which is another thing that I barely understand myself. There's you can write some humor. Both of us write science fiction, but none of us write in a Scalzi kind of science fiction. We don't write Douglas Adams type of science fiction. Find your own voice. Try different things until you find something that, like, maybe you thought you were a fantasy writer, but you write fantasy and it's all boring. You hate it because it's all derivative and it's all cliche. Try something different. Push yourself in a direction you didn't think to do until you find the thing that you like, or you give up, one or the other. And also, something very important, if you want to write, always look at bettering yourself. Don't think of yourself as bad, but always think of ways, always look at what other people are writing, try to find tricks, put your stuff out there, like Tom says. Get people to give you feedback, not mean critique. Like, find people that will not necessarily praise everything you do just because you're you. Like, don't get your mom to pin your book on her fridge. But find people that will read your book and be able to tell you.
Get your mom to tear your book apart.
Yeah. Get your mom to hate you and just destroy your ego with every piece of art that you do. That's what I do. That's what you do, right? Yeah, fine. Get the feedback so that you can improve. Don't take the feedback as just negative comments, but as tips and tricks and ways and things to explore that you can improve your writing. And those are two things that are going to sort of get you to that point where you know or you don't know if you like it or not.
I would say something that in watching Andrew Main develop as a writer, the two things that I thought were very, very helpful for him is, number one, he honed in on novellas. Just write shorter stories. Just get the reps of beginning, middle, end, character arcs, character motivations. Not the first thing that you like put out there in the world does not have to be a novel necessarily. And
this is a novella, really. I mean,
Yeah.
This is not super long.
You're above 40,000. It's a novel.
yeah,
It's
it's a novel. It's a novel.
It's with some extra words.
Sure, a few extra. And number two, what he did was every time he wrote a book, he would read a book on writing, in between each and every one of them, just to try to, for him, because he's Maine and he's insane.
Yeah.
I learned that recently.
He's a lunatic. But part of it for him is that he gets into these like modes where he's like, I need to be the super soldier of writing, and that means that I need to like educate myself in a lot of ways. And although I don't think that few people in the world have the kind of work ethic that Andrew Main has, but it is, I think, the essential truth there is know your limits and build. Writing's a muscle like anything else.
Yeah.
And build it up. It's there by exercise, and don't downplay the endorphins you get when you finish something or you like something, because that's such an important part of the process. Like for you seeing that book on the Barnes and Noble shelves, more so than doing anything for this process, is for the next 3 books.
Yeah.
Right?
Absolutely.
Like and same thing with you, JF.
No,
like
absolutely. And actually, it's to me it was a much more personal thing. Is when the first time I had someone come up to me and tell me that the book, like sort of my first book, inspired them to start working on their own book.
Yeah.
To me, that was the moment I went, oh, what I'm doing has a weight and importance beyond just writing about robots and stuff. It's like what I'm doing can get someone. Okay, maybe I'm not necessarily going to be the next Patrick Rothfuss, but maybe I'm going to be the guy who inspired the dude to be that guy. And that's that to me made me realize
That's
this
crazy
is
good.
important.
Yeah,
This is
yeah.
something. If I can maybe do this with my first book, or maybe not do it with my first book, maybe my second or my third, my fourth. So in a way, it's like this added value of why to keep doing it. So even in the moments where I'm not getting that endorphin, I can think back to, yeah, but what I'm doing has weight.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the things we're circling around here is the more you write, the better you get.
Yeah.
The first thing you write is going to be crap. Go download Boiling Point for free. Don't pay for it. It's not that good. But I got better because I kept doing it. Now, there are things we're talking about that can help you get better faster. But just continuing to write and look at your writing, just doing it makes you better over time.
Indeed. All right, now let's get into enough of this floofy feeling
Yeah,
stuff.
man, what the hell?
Let's get into the nitty gritty. You guys, obviously, the world of publishing has changed dramatically. We are far, far, far from the era of mailing off your manuscript to offices in New
only
York.
option.
Yeah. Or looking to get it published or serialized in a magazine. Now, ebooks are, I think we are fully at a point where ebooks have kind of shed any stigma that they once had through the 90s and the aughts. What is your advice in 2017 for somebody in this audience that writes a book, writes a novella? What should they do with it? Should they publish it on a blog? Should they serialize it on Twitter? Should they publish it as an ebook?
Yes.
What's the deal?
140 characters.
140 at a time.
Just do one tweet longer post.
Yeah.
I don't think there's a wrong way. I think what you need to do is take advantage of the options because, as we've said, one of the essential things to get better as a writer is have other people read it. So that
Yeah.
may just be handing it around to your circle of friends and telling them to give you honest feedback.
Well, both of you described the feedback or the moment of surprise, not in your internal process, but rather when other people started interpreting your writing. And I think that's important.
And they see things that you're like, oh, wow, I never even thought about that. You're right.
It's like, oh, wow, I was writing about my mom the whole time.
Yeah.
Well, and wait, look at the second book. I still am.
Yeah.
I mean, the simplest example is the editor of Pilot X said, look, you've got the climax of this story coming well before the end of the book. Why don't you take this part where he's at the Fringe Cascade and put it at the beginning and then tell everything else as a flashback? And I was like, oh, that's brilliant. Yeah. And it's a much better story because of that. So there's those kinds of things happen when you get other people to read it. And one of the great things about the internet is you can now, there's no more permission needed to just do something. Right? It doesn't guarantee it'll be successful, but you can just go on a CreateSpace or Lulu.com or any of a number of places and just publish a book. Maybe you and a couple friends will be the only people that buy it, but there's nothing like getting a copy of it in your hands. You're like, damn, I wrote that,
Yeah, the first book I wrote on NaNoWriMo, because going back to the whole practicing and skill thing, like I wrote 4 books before I even tried to publish Life Engineered, and I have 4 books that are just never going to see the day of light. But the first one, I did on NaNoWriMo, you got this little coupon for a free CreateSpace printed proof, and I got that done. Just that feeling of getting that proof that I then immediately locked into a vault so no one would read this piece of garbage. But even though it was a piece of garbage, it was my 50,000 words of garbage that I made, and I reached that level, that milestone was amazing.
So I would say, put it out. It can't hurt. And it'll help you learn about the process, even if you don't sell a ton of them. And you never know. You might sell a lot more than you think.
And one trap I'm noticing, I'm part of a bunch of Facebook groups and Twitter groups and whatever for emerging writers, just so I can learn what people are doing. One trap I see a lot of people doing that I don't recommend you fall into is the idea of selecting a mode of publication, deciding, I'm a self-published author, or I'm a traditionally published author.
No, absolutely.
The model, and this is something going back to Andrew Main, like has mentioned, like you probably in this day and age want to look, at least at the beginning, as you're feeling out what the publishing industry is like, be more of an hybridly published author.
Oh, yeah.
Explore different options, figure out what works for you. Traditional publishing might be what you need, and it's harder to get into, but once you get into it, that's what's going to be better for you. But depending on your skill set, if you're someone who's good at marketing yourself, you love getting your hands dirty into actually doing the layout for your books, looking for your own cover artist, then you might be more suited to self-publishing because these are skill sets that you like to use and that you have at your disposal. So playing around and checking what the options are and trying different things is going to make you first of all, have a much better understanding of the publishing industry, which Justin described as having changed, which is, pardon me, just slightly inaccurate. What the publishing industry is actually, it's changing right now. By the
Yes.
time we get out of this room, it's going to have changed again.
Yeah.
And tomorrow it will change. It's just continuously evolving as soon as someone comes up with a new model. Like Inkshares came up with their own crowdsourcing thing, and now there's Pronoun, and tomorrow there's going to be this other thing. Like there's always something new. So you need to have this global view of the publishing industry, and then you'll find where you work. And it may be just this one thing, or it might be you might be decide to do free books here, traditional publishing books for this series that you're doing, and then a few self-published one-off here and there. Like you'll find your own model in this hodgepodge crazy world.
And
a couple of things that are important that have changed too is it used to be in like 90s era.
Yeah.
If you e-published, the publishers are like, no thanks. You know, you've undermined the market.
sorry, garbage
Yeah.
person.
And now, thanks to Hugh Howey and Andy Weir and folks like that, self-publishing is often seen as like a good way to see like, okay, are they actually decent at this? So you can self-publish, you can put it just on Amazon if you want, and still send off to agents, still send off to publishers.
In fact, they will come to you.
Yeah.
That is,
Possibly.
yeah. I mean, that's what I watched with Andrew. You know, there. In my opinion, if you are not putting stuff out there and you are not like getting reviews and finding what's resonating with people, and the easiest way to do that is via ebooks. There is a robust market for people that burn through ebooks constantly. So you will be able to find an audience fairly easy on Amazon. And at that point, you know, in this market where nobody has any idea what anything is, like it might be the best thing for you because you have a reputation and you also know what works with your audience. The most romantic story that you can tell yourself, I think, as an aspiring author is this very, you know, ebook kind of world where, you know, you're just a lonely writer and
With
you
your
send
quill pen.
Yes, and then you send it off and
You discovered.
yeah,
You're
and
sending book tour.
yeah, in a rich leather office, there is a bespectacled publisher who's like, this is brilliant, and then you go on book tours, and now all of a sudden you're Stephen King. When the reality is that if let's say you take that exact super romantic idea, you now have the least amount of power you could possibly have. You have a platform that is, true story, very often indifferent to talent. They get a lot of stuff, they throw it out into the world. Sometimes, you know, they are there because they own printing presses.
Yeah.
They're not there because they're shamans. They're not there because they really know everything.
No, let's not get ahead of ourselves. We don't know.
Well, I mean, listen.
Read my forthcoming story about the secret
Yeah,
shaman.
the secret shamans. Where I think you guys have a tremendous advantage, even if the next thing that you do is with Random House, because you can speak confidently. I know what my audience is.
Mm-hmm.
I know what my sales numbers are.
Yeah.
I know where it resonates. I know how I need to talk to these people. Now, the next challenge is having to listen to you.
Yeah.
But still, like, if you didn't have that, you'd be even worse off.
Well, and that's why I'm saying just try self-publishing it, because
Yeah.
on the one hand, there's advice for the person who's like, I don't know, I'm afraid to put it out there. It's like, just put it out there. Your biggest problem is getting people to see it, not having too many people see it. So put it out there. Then there's the person who's like, oh no, man, I'm balls out. I want to actually become an author, and this is all I do. Then put it out there, self-publish, and send to agents and publishers, because that whole old way of doing things is still working, because the publishers have not fought the industry nearly as hard as music and television and movies did. They very quickly embraced it. And, you know, I'm not saying they didn't resist it,
No,
and there's not more to happen, but
the way I
publishers are much more understanding of what's going on in the internet, I think.
The way I see it is the traditional model kind of went to that. They went to war once, lost the first battle, and kind of backed off really quickly.
oh, wait a minute, let's actually learn from a mistake.
Exactly. They went to Verdun and they noticed what was going on. They went, no, we're not doing the Somme.
Yeah.
Too deep. Too deep a cut.
No, I like that. That was-
Too deep a cut.
I know you would. But.
All right. Is there any
And then the
questions?
mustard gas.
Any questions in the audience? All right. What do you got?
I think one reason that we're all here and that we're inspired at this their day job.
Yeah.
And I think everything you're saying is an analogy to what we've seen on those panels, people who are now full-time woodworkers or costume makers or full-time podcasters or, but following their passions. I've got, I haven't seen these thoughts, but just a couple of questions. One is that you touched on already is the community, and it seems like you found your community, but I would imagine that you tested out some, and maybe your skin might have been a little thin, and you know what, not going to go back there anymore. The second question has to do with tools that you touched on. We no longer have to be, I've got a book that's underneath the bed, but it's notebooks, all underneath the bed. If you could talk a little bit about what you found to be the most useful tech tools to help you on this, and whether you toss them out. And then the third one is having to be the entrepreneur.
Wait, should we
I
take
think
notes?
one that appeals
I got
to
it.
people with agents is that they can be the writer in the garret and somebody else is protecting them and taking away their power. But it's real. I realize I just threw out a lot at you.
All right.
Any piece of that.
All right, all right.
Tools, community, or
Gotcha. Okay. Well, let's start with tools because that's probably the simplest. What do you write on? And
Yeah, okay, the host of Daily Tech News Show, I feel so embarrassed to tell you.
Yeah.
I use Simple Note and Microsoft Word.
there we go.
That's it. That's all I use. And I have made myself learn over the years, because I used to be the person who's like, I'm going to have my writing desk,
Yeah.
my writing time, and I will sit down at my writing desk and I will write. And I'm like, that's just not practical for me. So I keep my Word document in Dropbox so that I can access it anywhere, as you just saw. And I use Simple Note to take that, like when I started about making the glossary, I just did that in Simple Note so I could access it anywhere, and that's it.
JF?
Wow, I can't believe I'm more high-tech than you are, Tom. Not by much, though, unfortunately. If you're expecting something really complex, I used to do very much what you're doing. Like, I used to work in Microsoft Word, and then I saw an ad saying, Storyist, $5 on iPad. And I went, I'm cheap. That looks like fun. So I use a piece of software called Storyist, but it's kind of evolved since then, and it allows me to do a lot of what Tom was describing. I can write there, I can also have notes, but it also syncs to Dropbox and is available on both on my iPad, on my phone, and on my computer, and it's all centralized. So it's a good tool for me when I have an idea waiting in line at to see a movie or something. I can just pull out my phone, type out the idea in Storyist, and it's going to be available on my laptop when I get home later to work it out or discover it's a stupid idea after all. But that's, and I wish I could say I have these other tools. I know a lot of people use Scrivener, which is a much more powerful platform from what I understand. Other people have, I wish I have this dream of having a cork board. You should do this for your next work. Just a cork board with a bunch of index cards and yarn going from one another. I'm saying
Like
you
a
should
serial
do it just
killer?
because of your theme.
Yeah.
I wish I had all of these things, but much like Tom said, it's not practical. I can't have that everywhere. I don't have the room in my basement troglodyte apartment to do it, so I'm trying. Actually, no, wait, keep it simple in the way that's comfortable for you.
Yeah,
Yeah. The best camera is the one you have on you.
Yeah.
totally.
All right. Community. Where did you first find a community, and did you get scalded in trying to bring your stuff to communities before you found one that you were comfortable with?
Oh, you're looking at me now?
Yeah.
Yeah, I hijacked other people's communities. Now, for communities, the best thing I found is I knew I was writing science fiction. I knew I was writing nerd things. So I already knew nerd people and knew nerd communities because as a nerd, that's what I did. So the idea was just to, very much going back to what was said previous, take what I was doing. I had this book about robots, and I said, hey, fellow nerds and dorks, I have a book about robots. Who likes it? And the people who were interested came to the book, read it, talked to other people, and it's a kind of a slow build. I'm not in the same level as you guys are, where you can do this for a living and you have these very massive community, but I can definitely say that compared from last year to this year, it's changed and it's evolved and it's grown, and next year it's probably going to be the same way, and eventually it'll get there. What you can't expect, in my opinion, you guys can tell me if I'm wrong, is to have an overnight community that suddenly is supporting you and you put out a Patreon and you're on Easy Street.
Yeah. No, that's true. I mean, for me, it was through tech, right? A little bit of tech TV, and then that carried over to CNET and Buzz Out Loud, created a bigger community, and then started doing things with Scott on Frog Pants, and so we exposed each other to each other's communities, and I went to Twit, and there was people who knew me from CNET at Twit, and then people who didn't, and then started doing Diamond Club stuff when Diamond Club was invented, or even Proto Diamond Club. And so it's just, honestly, not let me find a community, but collaborating with other people built the community as it went along.
Can I actually, I'm going to steal a quote. I can't remember if it was you, Brian, or Andrew. Your voices mix and
Understandable. Yeah.
You mean Justin Brian Main?
Yeah, all these. No, it's just I can't remember who exactly said it, but one of you guys said something that really resonated that kind of connects to that, is that if you guys want good fans, you need to be good fans.
No, we ripped that off from Tom.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Well,
No. Tom, something that has stuck with me forever is you get the chat room you deserve. And
So
that's
basically I'm ripping off from the ripoff?
well, no, I mean, listen,
Great.
this isn't public internet advice. This is life advice that you need to live on. Is that, like, ultimately, if you look around and you find yourself surrounded by people that you find detestable, you need to make changes in your own life.
Yeah.
And
This
you
is why
need,
I'm
you
struggling.
Need, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm not a good person.
I mean, with my podcast community, the one frustration that I run into is like, God, why are some of these people so pedantic? And then I look in the mirror and I'm like, oh, that's why. The community around you definitely reflect, like, it self-selects. People want to hang out with other people that they get. That doesn't mean they're identical. It
Sure.
just means, they kind of share.
So I should expect people to start mailing me skulls or something? This is going to get weird,
I
isn't
wouldn't
it?
be surprised.
I would not be shocked. Believe you me. There's, all I'll say is we had, the smoke monster thing started because me and Mitsula wanted to smoke cigars like 5 years ago, right? And yesterday somebody handed me a full glass top humidor filled with cigars. So, like,
It's a thing of beauty, and I don't even like cigars.
it's insane. Like, but it shows you, if you let everybody, if you are open and honest with your audience, you'd be amazed with what comes back. One thing before we get into the entrepreneur thing, I will say, in terms of community building, everybody here in this room has a tremendous advantage that everybody who is not in this room does not, and that is that the community that you are a part of, be it Frog Pants Diamond Club, is very open and supportive and communicates with each other on a very active level. There's Discords and Facebook groups. So if you are to launch an ebook, right? Number one, you have a huge advantage because you can probably get 5 or 6 reviews immediately. You can give the books away to people that you are talking to already in these communities. If they read them, they will review them. Now you have something that 80% of emerging authors don't have and can't have because they're talking to their families who don't know, I don't know Facebook, I don't know Amazon, is that on the computer? You have tech literate people that can give you not only good feedback and not only good support, but also advance your career. But let's talk about the entrepreneurship element of it. What of it do you take to of the entrepreneurial element of being an author, and what do you find frustrating?
I take to none of it.
None of it.
Yeah, I don't like the business side of anything, really.
You don't like selling it? You don't like marketing it?
No. I like writing it, and I like hearing what other people have to think about it, and everything
Yeah.
else is a chore that I have to do, and I know I have to do. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
How much of that do you think would be different if let's say the podcasting, let's take away the podcasting, let's say you are just Tom Merritt, the author, because you've created a great community that you have gotten out there for podcasting. Do you think some of that, would be your motivation for writing, or would you still be
I'm
like?
not sure I quite understand. I'm tempted to answer that by saying it's the same for podcasting as it is for
Yeah,
writing. So.
I guess, yeah. I mean, but I don't know. You've been very good at organically getting out there and
Yeah.
spreading the word on DTNS.
Well, because I know
Or-
I have to, right?
Yes,
Like, it's
I guess that's the thing.
yeah.
If you knew you had to for writing, I suspect that you would have to. That drive would
Oh, and I know I
manifest.
yeah. No, and I know I do, and I appreciate that I have a bit of an advantage, and I get a little lazy about marketing because of that advantage.
Because you're like, hey, I'm already talking to people.
I just talk about it on my show and on Twitter. Duh.
There we go.
So, yeah.
JF, is there anything that you enjoy about the entrepreneurial elements, or anything that specifically frustrates you?
Well, anybody who's interacted with me, especially this weekend in Nerdtacular at my table of knows that I have absolutely no talent for the business aspect of it. They show up. I'm supposed to be selling book, and I have no change.
Let me stop you right there. JF brought his books to sell and has a table. So he's already well in front of me.
Yeah, but Tom, what else was I going to do?
JF even said, hey, would you like me to stock some Pilot X at my table and I could sell for you? And I said, yes. And then I never followed up.
Just to emphasize, I'm the one who brought the books at the panel.
These are his.
That's amazing.
But this actually segs very nicely into the part that I do enjoy about the entrepreneurship part of the writing thing, is looking at other people's work and looking at. I hang out with a lot of the other Inkshares authors, and I like to get their numbers and see what they're doing and parse it and dissect it. But that's kind of part of what I do for a living as a marketing director. I love looking at these stats and looking at these dynamics and studying how they're getting like their sales vector and all that. But when it comes to looking at my own thing, I immediately just see tree trunk. Like it's the tree, no forest.
Yeah.
I need to have this sort of, I can't really handle the business side of my own writing because I'm too close to it, and then I get confused and stupid.
So even for you, whose job is to look at products and understand the black and white of like, all right, increase 20% here, decrease 5% here, you cannot look at your writing as a product in the way that you can for other stuff.
It's absolutely impossible. And this one of the fights that is constant for absolutely everything that I do is that I am incapable and incompetent at marketing and promoting myself because there's a psychological aspect to it. I have a lot of difficulty going to someone and saying, hey, this is my book, and it is so awesome that not only should you pay about $15 for it, but you should also invest about $20 of your 20 hours of precious time reading it, and hopefully you'll like it. I have a lot of difficulty doing that. But if I grab Tom's book, and I like Tom's book, I can go, this is amazing. This is Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, classic sci-fi revival.
Yeah.
No, but it is. It's to me, this is like a return to classic science fiction because of how it's written, the themes it approaches. It's easier for me to find the quality and focus on the quality of someone else's work than mine because I know everything that's wrong with this, and it is so hard to forget it. And halfway through a sales pitch, not go, oh, there's that one chapter. It's rough.
Yeah.
And then people,
Yeah.
but
I want you guys just to Freaky Friday, like one, for like 3 months, and just
Yeah.
see how well you guys can
What
hawk
I'm getting
your
at
own
is
stuff.
I need to hire JF to market my
To
book.
market your book. All right, Carrie had a question.
I think I know, at least for what I want to write as nonfiction author, who my audience is. And it's going to be you, so don't delete my email.
specifically,
My question is, how do you deal with, how do I stop editing? Because I don't know many people that look at everything they write and they go, that's great, I'm leaving that alone. You continually want to change, you want to look, you want to keep touching it before you look at it and go, oh, I did too much. Now I have to come back and relook at it in another way and then expand on this or leave this alone. Because you're the only person who knows in here where you really want that story to go. And while I appreciate that you can have that creative inspiration to go somewhere else as you're writing, when you feel like you want to go to a certain place, I go like this, and then I come back and I'm writing all over again. And I'm overwhelmed and I stop.
Yeah.
All right, editing. When do you stop guidelines?
Yeah, well, there's this very famous in tech circles talk from this guy at Apple about, good artistship. And so
Real artistship, right?
or something like that.
Yeah.
Real artistship.
or what you guys say on After Things. I keep referring After Things. It's my business model is that podcast essentially, but better done than perfect.
Yeah. And so that's the simple advice is like, set yourself a limit, and at a certain point you say, you know what, it's good enough, and it's never going to be perfect. You already have admitted that, right?
Yeah,
You
well,
said
I
that
know
in your
it's never
question,
gonna
so
be
you know
perfect.
that.
But
So
I'm
you
the
need,
only one who knows that story, so
You need
for
to
me,
set that-
when somebody else tell me that it needs
Yeah.
to change.
I think that's your cue, not to step on JF. This is where you need outside voices.
Yeah.
Because a lot of the stuff that you are going to think is like, I don't know about this, and I don't know about this, yada, yada, yada. Like, if you throw it out to people and they don't mention it, or they're like, oh no, I like this chapter writ large, right? Or I really like that moment, then these little things that you're going to obsess about, and maybe this should be in here, maybe this shouldn't, they liked it. Mission accomplished. Like, yeah, maybe it could be 1% better if you perfected that one little element, but you're going to drive yourself nuts
And
if you're in the margins.
just admitted to me that you're starting to cycle and spend too much time. And at the moment you know that, hand it to somebody else.
Yeah, it's essentially one of the analogies that I kind of use is I learned a lot of classical art as part of my graphic design program before I got into marketing. And when we were doing like sculpting and stuff, one of the things that the teacher kept telling us is at some point you need to just stop playing with the clay. Like you need to get your shapes, you need to always be perfecting and adding, but eventually when you realize that you're not adding, you're just playing around, you're just moving the pieces. Once you figure out that no matter how much you're moving the pieces, the level of quality doesn't really, that needle doesn't budge anymore.
You're just playing with yourself.
Yeah.
That's a really interesting way of
That's
putting it.
a good way. I think I'm going to say that publicly more often. But the moment you start playing with yourself, and you notice that's all you're doing,
Involve someone else.
yeah, absolutely. Then but the best part of that is, if we're talking about like the writing part, is that there is kind of a tiered, like a classical tiered editing system where the moment you notice that you're playing with yourself too much, well, then you invite a few friends to be your beta reader, and then you get their feedback, and they'll tell you if there's still some pieces that need to be moving, and they'll probably tell you, hey, move this piece here in ways that you didn't expect, and so you're getting this new perspective. You may not agree, or you may agree, and then it's your choice to decide if you go ahead with it. And then once you've, again, gone through this whole process, but with more people, and you realize that, okay, we're back to that point where that needle's not moving, we're still playing around with pieces, then you get a professional.
Yeah, or you push it out, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Or
and that's it. I think for the next evolution, I would guess, or I've seen, is understanding beyond your self-criticism and your self-editing. Now understanding, okay, here's in my checklist when I get this back from somebody else. Here's what I'm not sure of. I'm not going to tell anybody that. I'm just going to let them give me their feedback, and the stuff that they don't mention, maybe it's not as bad as I think, right? But if they come back with other feedback, like, I thought this was slow, it's like, okay, well, I know that I was supposed to be building in this moment to that, and if that didn't land, then, okay, I do need to check that. But like, you need to take some of that energy of tearing yourself apart and start understanding, okay, now here's my checklist of what I think is good, what I think is bad. I'm going to get this feedback, and then I will probe them on the questions that are relative to the things that I'm concerned about.
Try to go from playing with yourself to probing things.
To probing, yes, to being better about playing with other people.
You need to have another person.
Indeed.
Sometimes.
In fact, multiple. All right, question.
No, just to finish that. There's an excellent video by Jake Parker, who's a Salt Lake City illustrator and writer.
Mm-hmm.
Video on YouTube, search for Finish Not Perfect.
Yeah.
It's something that I watch every second day as a breakfast thing, because it's
Yeah.
right about this.
There's a million ways. The greatest thing about being smart is that you can think of stuff. The worst part about being smart is you have the exact recipe on how to tear yourself down.
So it sounds like you kind of talked about, you have like a writer hat and an editor hat, so I'm going off that. I have a difficult time separating those two things. So as I'm writing, it's important to get words on paper, but then I'll see something previously that I've just written that I want to go back and edit. So do you have any advice to kind of turn that off and just kind of like puke words and then put on the editor hat and go back and write, or go back and edit that?
First of all, I love your narwhal socks.
Thank you.
I've been enjoying them this entire time. Second of all, I mean, I don't have an easy answer, but the answer is when you find yourself starting to look back up the page, just get to that later, I mean, unless it's really quick, I'll indulge myself, but just you got to force yourself to look forward. I don't have any good tricks for making yourself do that.
Shock collar.
First of all, now I'm angry at Tom for putting the narwhal song in my head. I will not forget
Narwhals,
that.
that's an interesting animal.
Yes, let's not go there.
It is.
Because now it's just going to be on a loop. Here's the thing. sit down with your editor self, like have your two selves have a conversation, and ask your editor self, hey, how do you feel, and really put yourself in the shoes of an editor. How do you feel about editing as things are getting done? And try to really answer, how would an editor answer to that question? And the question would be, no, I'm not taking that job, that's a stupid job. An editor will be a lot more comfortable looking at a finished product because, yes, okay, maybe this sentence needs a bit of tweaking, but they also want to look at it as an ensemble project. They want to look at it as a whole thing. So editing as you go along, you're also kind of shortchanging yourself because you're not addressing the larger issues. You're not touching on the bigger things. You're really just you're playing around with the granularity of it instead of using you're looking at the big picture. Meanwhile, if you do finish it, it's going to be imperfect, and maybe your editor voice is going to be screeching that things need to be fixed. But then you can hand the entire thing to your editing self and say, "There, fix it." But don't just fix little pieces as you go along, fix the whole thing. And also you'll waste less time because once you are done, if you've rewritten this sentence or that sentence or you've corrected this paragraph a million times, and then when your editor self looks at the whole book and goes, this entire chapter that you agonized over, we're taking it out.
Yeah.
All that time, all that effort, and all that anguish, wasted.
I would say,
I would also add, because I was thinking about it while we were talking, and something you said kind of made me think, how do I do that myself? If you trust and know that there is a time where you will be editing, I think that's what helps me is like, I'm not worried like, well, I got to fix it now or it'll never get fixed. I know I've got a pattern of, I've set aside time for editing, so I know that will get fixed later. And that, I think that helps me ignore it for the time being. So I think that's something that I didn't used to do is set aside that time. So maybe if you're like, hey, you know what, I will set aside tomorrow to just do editing and go back and do editing. Maybe that helps.
I would say also be arrogant as a writer. Be more arrogant as a writer. Your writer self deserves to be able to finish what they are doing. Like, and this is something that in all creation, but my least favorite thing on the planet is somebody leaning over my shoulder. And when you are indulging that self-destructive element to continue to edit, you are standing over your own shoulder, and you are actively damaging the writing process.
Turn around to your artist self and say,
To
I am an
back
artiste.
back up. Let me finish it. You know, you can't like, Susie walked into a cafe. Who's Susie? We don't know anything about Susie. Like, why don't we describe it? It's like, it's bad writing to say, Susie, a 43-year-old waitress
Just
whose
wait
son
a
just
fucking
died.
minute, editor.
Just wait
You'll
a minute.
find out about
Don't
Susie
worry.
later.
Let me get to the
You want
end.
Tom to swear now. You happy with yourself?
But no, I mean, I separate them, and it is self-discipline. Like you are, if you're doing this all as a one-man shop, understand that there are different phases, and if you are not respecting them, then you are actively damaging your own product.
But I do want to know about Susie's backstory.
Seriously.
Yeah, just get on it. But just to bring it around kind of full circle also, if you can get that separation, it's not just about letting your author side, be an arrogant asshole, but it's also about letting your arrogant and artistic and creative side have fun. Let your writer side enjoy the process of writing, which means you will enjoy the process of writing more, which means you will have an easier time sitting down and writing for longer periods of time because it'll be more fun. And then you won't have any problem having discipline writing because you don't need discipline to do things you enjoy. You just do them.
Do we have one back there?
Can I touch a little bit more about, ask a little bit more about the discipline?
Yes.
The more you do it, the more you feel the need to do it, the better it feels, the more you want to. For me especially, I know other people have it, the struggle to get to that point of just doing it in the first place. You come home, you've done your normal job, the bill-paying job, now you have your passion. But you're tired. How do you get that start? Kicking your own ass to do it.
Yeah. That's why, I mean, it's going to be different for different people, right? Different things motivate different people. But for me, the one thing that I make sure I do is lower the barrier to entry. Like, don't think like, I have to sit down, for me, I have to sit down and write 5,000 words tonight. For me, it's like, you know what? I only have to write one sentence. When I'm feeling resistance, I may have a goal of like, I need to do 1,600 words, but when I sit down, it's like, you know what? I only need to write one sentence, because that gets you over that hump Once you sit down and you're writing that first sentence, you're like, well, one more sentence won't hurt. This is starting to, and then you start to take off.
I can give you a couple of dumb tricks that I use. First of all, like what Tom says is 100% correct. Like, don't give yourself, don't say tonight I'm going to climb a mountain. It's a bit like exercise. You don't want to tell yourself tonight I'm going to do 3 hours at the gym. You're not going to go. You want to give yourself some approachable goals, something that's easy to do, that you know you can do whether you like to do it or not, but you can expand upon if you're like on a roll. One of the tricks I found that's actually not just good for the discipline aspect, but also keeps your kind of creative wheels running the whole day, is don't finish when you're done. Give yourself a cliffhanger. If you know, like, I've done enough for tonight, but man, there's this one I'm about to get to this scene, it's gonna be pretty rad to write. Stop.
And then Susie pulled out a gun.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the moment Susie pulls out a gun, before you start describing the gun, stop. Give yourself, like, you've done what you wanted to do, you've been disciplined, you've done your chunk for the day, but now you have something to look forward to.
Yeah,
So
I like
next
that.
time you sit down the next day, you've had all day to think about this gun. Is it an AK-47? It's just like a pistol, it's a snub-nosed thing. Like, you've researched guns. You sit down, you want to write about Susie's stupid gun so much. And so you don't even have, like, you're coming home from work and you're looking forward. You're not looking at it as a task or a chore. You're looking at it as your reward for finishing your day, is that you get, not you have to, you get to sit down and write that
Yeah.
scene.
You get to find out, why is Susie pointing that gun at the narwhal?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
They are the Jedi of the scene.
They are indeed. And I think something that has kind of been circled around a couple times is just that demystification. And you guys talked about it early in the panel, that this is, don't sit down and say, all right, how do I start to write a novel, right? It's, when you're at work, start doodling down ideas for the story, right? Just,
No one's monitoring your work. No one's
No,
keeping
just
track.
fall in love with the idea, and then it's a lot easier to say, I'm tired, work sucked, my boss is a dick, but I really like this story. Your boss is an asshole.
You talk about yourself, not your wife.
She's not the boss of me
I don't know your relationship.
most of the time.
But, I think if it's about that idea, and it's about that next challenge, then it's a lot easier than thinking about it as the macro of like, my career-defining novel.
Yes.
I sit down and write the first page
My
today.
entire future rests on this first sentence.
All right.
Can we talk just 1 second about the people, like, I try to sit down, but I have this blank page and it's stopping me. Because that's one thing that, like, never let that stop you. Write something stupid. You
Right.
can always erase it later.
You could all start with Susie pulling the gun on the narwhal.
Yeah.
You finding a blank page, I mean, just write something.
Yeah, 'cause
Anything.
the
The
moment-
stupidest thing in the world. Don't hold yourself to any standard if you're having a problem getting started.
Because there's nothing quite as intimidating as a blank page. And the moment you write your title and you write a first sentence, it doesn't have to be the first sentence of your book. You don't even have to write chronologically, technically. But the moment you have some words on the sheet, it's easier to write. And just don't let a blank page stop you.
Pat had no idea what to write for his novel.
Yeah. And I think that
Grocery
is
list.
something where you guys are at different stages of your career than you were 5 years ago.
Sure.
Right? And you guys will be at different stages if you want to keep with it 5 years from now. And a lot of what you guys are talking about your process today is not, if you were to just copy and paste that 5 years ago, you'd probably find it hard to do because you're just in different productivity modes. So there's no wrong way to eat a Reese's. Like, as long as you're writing and thinking about
I can think
story.
of a couple of wrong ways.
I mean, it might be wrong to eat a Reese's.
Might be wrong to eat a Reese's. All right, any questions? I think we got time for one more. No? All right, then ladies and gentlemen, let's give a big round of applause for J.F.Dubeau. New book, A God in the Shed, available now.
The book is called A God in the Shed.
And then not for sale here because he forgot to organize it is
Fair copy.
Pilot X. That is by Tom Merritt. Let's get a big round of applause for Tom Merritt. And a big round of applause for yourself for coming out.
And a huge thank you for Justin for monitoring the panel. I think he did an amazing job.
Yeah.
All right, now I need to.
What's that?
Oh yeah, if any of you have read my first book, The Life Engineered, I'm currently funding for the sequel to that book called